Good afternoon, I'm Katie Wilson and you're watching A News. Let's see your headlines. Donald Trump sets reciprocal tariffs on dozens of countries' exports. US envoy to visit aid distribution sites in Gaza after meeting with Netanyahu. Russian missile and drone attacks on Kyiv have killed at least 16 people. US President Donald Trump has imposed steep tariffs of up to 50% on goods from 69 countries as he pushes ahead with a self-imposed deadline to reshape global trade.
US President Donald Trump has imposed steep new tariffs on imports from 69 countries, including major partners like Canada, Brazil and India, as part of a broad effort to reset global trade terms. The tariffs range from 10% to 50%, with most set to take effect on August 7th, unless goods are already in transit. Under the latest executive order, Canada now faces a 35% duty, Brazil 50%, India 25%, and Switzerland 39%. All countries not listed in the order will be subject to a default 10% import tax. Goods loaded before August 7th and arriving by October 5th will be exempt. The administration also clarified that the tariffs are not cumulative, meaning countries like Brazil won't face double rates, but will still see effective duties rise as high as 50% on most goods. Canada's higher tariffs are already in force after missing the August 1st deadline. Trump accused Ottawa of failing to curb fentanyl smuggling and claimed its government was very poorly led. Mexico, by contrast, secured a 90-day delay after last-minute talks between Trump and Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum. That pause avoids a 30% hike on most Mexican goods, but certain sectors remain affected, including a 50% tariff on metals and a 25% duty on cars and non-USMCA compliant items. India was hit with a 25% rate after negotiations broke down over access to its agricultural market. Trump also signalled penalties over India's oil trade with Russia. Meanwhile, China has until August 12th to reach a final trade agreement with the US after months of preliminary talks. A US official confirmed progress, but did not elaborate.
Today is the deadline for President Trump's trade deals, but few have materialised. Meanwhile, global partners are shifting focus, with Asia strengthening ties, Africa building self-reliance, and South America adjusting exports.
Today marks the deadline to land a trade deal, one that could define the next chapter in US economic policy. Back in April, after Donald Trump launched what he calls his Liberation Day tariffs, his administration boldly promised 90 deals in 90 days. But 120 days later, that ambitious tally stands at just 8, and even those remain vague in detail. But it raises a bigger question. If nations aren't rushing to the table with Washington, where are they looking instead? In April, as a response, South Korea, China and Japan held their first economic dialogue in 5 years, seeking to strengthen regional trade ties as all three Asian export powers brace for the fallout from US tariffs. Meanwhile, American companies are pulling back from China at record levels as tax hikes and rising tensions continue to reshape the economic relationship between the world's two largest economies. A new survey from the US-China Business Council reveals that just 48% of US firms plan to invest in China this year, a steep drop from 80% in 2024. The report also highlights a steady decline in optimism about China's economic prospects, alongside growing pessimism about any improvement in US-China relations. In Africa, countries such as Uganda are doubling down on efforts to build a more resilient, self-sufficient domestic economy. But beyond individual strategies, some African nations see opportunity in the shifting global landscape. This uncertainty could be the catalyst to finally establish the long-discussed regional value chains, allowing countries to trade more within the continent. And in South America, trade shifts are also underway. The region is rich in commodities, with Brazil and Argentina among the world's largest exporters of soybeans and petroleum. Now, with the US imposing tariffs on Chinese goods and China hitting back, South American nations may benefit. Brazil could expand agricultural exports to China to fill the gap left by US suppliers. Trump's latest deal with the EU could be a major win, averting a broader trade war by imposing a reduced 15% tariff on most EU goods. The agreement stabilizes relations between two economies that together account for nearly a third of global trade. However, the EU is still looking for trading partners in India, Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand, and the Philippines.
Countries in Asia have been among those hardest hit by President Trump's tariff announcements. This includes India, a key strategic partner of the United States. For months, Indian and American negotiators discussed a trade pact, but talks failed to translate into a deal in time, with the US also targeting New Delhi over its links to Russia. Our correspondent Neha Punia has more.
India faces 25% tariffs on exports to the United States now. Along with that, an unspecified penalty for buying oil and weapons from Russia. Now that makes the American tariffs on Indian exports higher than what many other Asian countries are facing, barring of course Laos and Myanmar. Businesses here have been reacting, saying that American buyers are either already cutting back or cancelling on their orders, saying they'll hold back until there's more clarity on what that penalty component of tariffs will look like. India sources just about under 40% of its oil needs from Russia, and Moscow is a key defense provider for New Delhi as well. India says that discounted Russian oil is key to keeping its economy running, and this is important given it's a major crude importer. But the US says India's links to Russia are, quote, a point of irritation for Washington, D.C. India has not commented on that, but the Indian government has also not said anything about why trade talks with the US failed to translate into a deal. Sources, however, have been saying that New Delhi was keen to avoid, quote, long-term pain by hurrying into an unenforceable and lopsided deal with the US. It was facing pressure to open up its agriculture and dairy markets, a move that New Delhi says will hurt millions of subsistence farmers who make up a bulk of the country's workforce. India resisted that pressure through the entire negotiation, and the government has now told Parliament India will continue to work to protect its national interest at all costs. Estimates suggest the tariffs could cost India billions in losses and also hurt its economic growth. It's why reports suggest the government is mulling options and weighing up how it could go ahead. It's considering reportedly a proposal to increase US imports, including energy, electronics and communication equipment to appease the US, according to one Bloomberg report. American trade negotiators are also expected to arrive in New Delhi in mid-August to continue trade talks with New Delhi. Neha Punia, Foreign News in New Delhi.
Joining us now to discuss the fallout from Trump's tariff announcement is Jorge Costa Oliveira, international business consultant from Lisbon. Thank you for being with us. Now, how have major US trade partners responded to these new tariffs?
Hi, it's my pleasure. Well, there are many different cases. The United States opened many fronts in terms of a trade war. I think that the most important ones are the ones regarding the main economic blocs. And there are many different situations. In the case of Brazil, obviously, it's a kind of political blackmail to try to interfere in Brazil's internal order. In terms of the Southeast Asia, I don't think it's a very smart approach, given that it is becoming the most relevant engine of growth in the world economy, and the place where many companies from other places, especially from China, are delocalizing to. It's now, Southeast Asia is currently the main market where Chinese companies export to. So I think that there are many different cases. But in general terms, what we see is a clear attempt of imposing tariffs, and these tariffs basically they have different functions. If we believe on what Stefan Miran, the main economic advisor of the president, which does not appear a lot on TVs and media, so people usually don't pay attention, but he's the smart one. He's the guy that explains that tariffs are important as a means to impose a tribute over the countries that depend on the US trade and the US market on the one hand, or that benefit from the fact that the US currency and the US military presence guarantees a Pax Americana on the one hand and a stable financial system. So countries should pay for that. So that is arguable, but that makes some sense. I have many doubts that this is really what is in Trump's head. I think in Trump's head, this idea is that he will be able to raise significant taxes or levies equivalent to taxes, and that is government income, and that will contribute to reduce the budget deficit that the United States has. This year, it is estimated that it will be 1.8 trillion, perhaps a bit more. So this and the public debt, the federal public debt is huge. So the main rift between Elon Musk and Donald Trump was about this.
So some countries have secured exemptions.
Let me just finish.
Go on,
if you impose tariffs, it's very clear that those tariffs will have a reflection in the domestic order. It will increase the prices. Now, the problem that we face here is that, so there's a trade-off, but in political terms, in terms of approval rates, what are most Americans going to be concerned with? Prices rising, or with the balance of or the willingness to balance the budget, which is probably a medium-term objective. So
what impact could this have on the economy in that case, like especially for consumers, small businesses, exporters?
Well, there will be many effects. Obviously, if you raise levies on tariffs, you are going to help your national industries, or even help delocalize other industries into your country, and therefore promote a reindustrialization. So this is the main purpose, theoretically. That is not going to happen in many cases. That is not going to happen, I would say, in most cases. The reason why companies delocalized from the US market to other places, it's because there were reasons for that. Just listen to the CEO of Apple. He's very clear why they can't go back to the US. And even if they would, and even if it would be possible to have skilled people to produce the products they do, the cost will be prohibitive. So it does not make much sense. And if that was the real reason, we would have targeted tariffs per products. And that's why when you want to do a trade deal, and again, I emphasize, these are not trade deals, okay? Or vague trade deals, as the journalist mentioned in the piece. These are pre-deals. These are not deals. So a deal will take 2 years to negotiate. Trump knows that. His administration knows that. So it's going to take time, and a lot is going to change. That's my opinion. And the fear of inflation is what has caused all this delay, and will continue to cause delay, and in my opinion, will cause a reduction on the tariffs, on the rate of tariffs, on the percentage of tariffs, on the one hand, and on the products that are subject to those tariffs. As we will see the trade deals moving along, the negotiation moving along, we are likely to see that. Why? Because that's the only way to cope the need to improve delocalization or reshoring of the production back to the US on the one hand, and on the other hand, to guarantee that you don't have an absurd inflation rate that will cost you politically. And in economic terms, let's not forget, the President Trump currently has an approval rate of less than 40%, probably 35% on economic matters. On other matters, he's doing fairly well, or didn't fall too much, but on economic matters, he has a problem, and he knows that. So we are going to continue to see a delay in these terms.
Thank you very much for your insights and for joining us on the programme.
Thank you. Yeah.
Now, a permanent grand ballroom is finally coming to the White House after more than a century of improvised gathering spaces. President Trump is personally backing the $200 million project, with construction set to begin in September.
The White House is set to build a permanent grand state ballroom costing $200 million. It'll accommodate up to 650 seated guests in a 90,000 square foot space. Previously, gatherings were held in makeshift tent accommodation on the front lawn. President Donald Trump is personally championing and partially funding the construction of a structure, with work beginning next month.
We are proud to announce that the construction of the new White House ballroom will begin. For 150 years, presidents, administrations, and White House staff have longed for a large event space on the White House complex that can hold substantially more guests than currently allowed. President Trump has expressed his commitment to solving this problem on behalf of future administrations and the American people.
White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt called the addition a long overdue correction to what she described as a design gap in the executive mansion. She said that the temporary arrangements were unsightly and unfit for the stature of presidential occasions. She said that Trump sees the ballroom as a legacy contribution. The new building will stand apart from the main White House, but officials say it'll closely reflect its neoclassical style. The project will be led by McCreary Architects, a firm known for its classical design work. While the plan has sparked a wave of contrasting responses, the Trump ballroom is set to reshape the East Wing as the nation's most iconic residence.
Two top US officials are heading into Gaza this Friday to assess the worsening humanitarian crisis. The White House says the visit is aimed at improving food aid delivery to the war-torn territory.
Finding out firsthand what life is like for the 1.9 million people displaced in Gaza. That's what the US Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and Ambassador to Israel Mike Huckabee are doing on Friday. It's a rare visit by senior American officials to the war-torn Strip. The White House says they'll inspect food distribution sites and secure a plan to deliver more food and meet with local Gazans to hear firsthand about the situation on the ground.
The special envoy and the ambassador will brief the president immediately after their visit to approve a final plan for food and aid distribution into the region, and we will provide more details for all of you once that plan is approved and agreed on by the President of the United States.
According to United Nations aid agencies, food insecurity in Gaza is reaching catastrophic levels. The UN estimates that nearly 80% of the population is now reliant on international assistance. At least 147 people have died of starvation already, according to the local health authority, which says 88 of them were children. 1 in 3 people is now going multiple days without food, says the UN. Since late May, the UN Human Rights Office estimates more than 1,300 Palestinians have been killed while trying to receive aid. As the humanitarian situation continues to deteriorate, Washington is under increasing pressure to ensure assistance reaches civilians quickly.
The United States has imposed visa sanctions on both the Palestinian Authority and Palestine Liberation Organization. The State Department accuses them of obstructing peace efforts with Israel and announced visa bans for unnamed individuals, citing actions to internationalize the conflict and ongoing support for violence. The PA and PLO, which represent the Palestinian people and have long sought international recognition of statehood, have not yet responded to the restrictions. A deadly wave of Russian missile strikes has once again shaken Ukraine's capital. At least 16 people, including 2 children, were killed in the early morning barrage, with more than 100 others injured. Among the survivors is a young woman who fell from the 9th floor of a building. Her story and the growing civilian toll offer a glimpse into the human cost of a war that shows no signs of easing.
The ruins of a residential building tell the story of a deadly missile strike that shattered lives before dawn on Thursday. But Veronica woke up on top of the rubble with a broken leg and concussion, but had no memory of how she survived the fall.
Most likely I somehow glided down. I don't know how it happened. It was sort of a levitation. I did not realize what I was doing. I was in shock. I didn't understand what to do, where to go. When I looked at my leg, I panicked even more. I should have evaluated the situation, what was going on. But instead I panicked.
Though Veronica somehow survived the fall, her parents were not as fortunate. A neighbour, Olena Yefiminkova, said she saw her mother's lifeless body and was told her father didn't make it either.
A girl from the 9th floor got blown out with the bed. Her mother was found dead. I saw it. One of the neighbours said that her father was found dead too. We stayed alive. I don't know how we stayed alive. We stayed alive.
Doctors say while Veronica's physical injuries are serious, the mental trauma is deeper, a harsh reminder of the psychological scars of war.
Her lower limb is broken. It is strange for someone from the 9th floor and to have, by and large, insignificant injuries. But she has severe mental disorder that was caused by stress. She doesn't know what happened to her parents.
Russia had launched more than 300 drones and 8 missiles in the attack, killing 16 people, including 2 children, and wounding more than 100 others, according to authorities. The Interior Ministry said more than 1,200 police and rescuers were tackling the aftermath.
As of now, tens of people are in hospitals. I am truly grateful to the rescue workers, to the policemen, to every doctor, to every nurse, to all who are involved in helping out, to all utilities teams. It is very important that Ukrainians can help each other to do their work in such an orderly and humane way. They restore life after Russian strikes. My condolences. To all the friends and family.
Станом на зараз відомо про 14 загиблих у Києві.
City authorities announced a day of mourning to be held on Friday. US President Donald Trump sharply criticized Russia's behavior against Ukraine and said he plans to impose sanctions on Moscow if no agreement can be reached.
Yeah, we're going to put sanctions. I don't know that sanctions bother him. You know, they know about sanctions. I know better than anybody about sanctions and tariffs and everything else. I don't know if that has any effect, but we're going to do it. Europe is extremely upset. But this is a war that should have never happened. This is a war that wouldn't have happened if I were president. Thank you.
He has given Russian President Vladimir Putin until the 8th of August to make a deal.
Rwanda and the Democratic Republic of Congo convened their first joint oversight meeting in Washington to implement a peace agreement brokered by the Trump administration. However, key steps such as the withdrawal of Rwandan troops and military operations against armed groups remain stalled. The conflict, rooted in decades-old tensions, continues to impact the region's stability and millions of lives.
Rwanda and the Democratic Republic of Congo convened their first joint oversight committee meeting in Washington on Thursday, aimed at implementing a peace deal brokered by the Trump administration in June. The African Union, Qatar, and the United States were also present. However, delays are mounting. The joint security body has yet to meet. The Rwandan troop withdrawal has not begun, and military campaigns against the Forces Démocratiques de Libération du Rwanda are stalled. On the ground, rebel forces such as the M23 and Wazalendo are reportedly reinforcing their positions. Trump's senior Africa advisor, Masad Boulos, insists the process remains on track, promising the joint security mechanism set up in June will convene soon. Tensions between the two countries have been simmering for decades, rooted in the aftermath of Rwanda's 1994 genocide. Armed Hutu groups accused of participating in the killings fled into DRC and remain there to this day. Kigali views the Democratic Forces for the Liberation of Rwanda, the FDLR, as a continuing threat. Meanwhile, Kinshasa accuses Rwanda of backing M23 rebels operating inside its territory. However, Rwanda denies supporting them. The conflict has displaced more than 7 million people and attracted foreign interest due to the region's vast mineral wealth. In June, a breakthrough peace deal was signed in Washington, brokered by the Trump administration, called the Washington Accord. Under the agreement, Rwandan forces were to withdraw from the region within 90 days. Despite growing pressure, both sides are still negotiating. The true test will be what happens not in Washington, but on the ground.
A ministerial meeting between Israel and Syria took place in Baku. According to news agency AFP, the talks focused on the security situation in southern Syria.
A high-level meeting between Syrian and Israeli officials took place on Thursday in Baku, Azerbaijan. Syrian Foreign Minister Assad al-Shaibani and Israel's Minister of Strategic Affairs Ron Dermer attended the talks. This followed a similar meeting in Paris last week. The focus was on southern Syria, particularly the aftermath of deadly clashes in the Swaida region. This isn't the first time Baku has hosted discreet negotiations. The Azerbaijani capital has hosted at least 3 rounds of dialogue between Israel and Turkey over military activity in Syria. Earlier this month, Syrian President Ahmad al-Sharaa paid an official visit to Azerbaijan. During the trip, the two countries signed agreements on post-war reconstruction in Syria and energy exports, including a plan to deliver Azerbaijani gas to Syria via Turkey. According to a Syrian source cited by I24 News, al-Sharaa also met with a high-level Israeli delegation in Baku. These talks highlight Azerbaijan's growing strategic location for hosting and facilitating discussions on conflicts in the Middle East.
Turkey's President Recep Tayyip Erdogan said that he welcomed recent steps taken by France, the UK and other countries to recognise a Palestinian state. President Erdogan expressed appreciation for the recent humanitarian responses from Europe, particularly from France and Britain, describing them as highly valuable. Speaking in Ankara, he said he had called French President Emmanuel Macron to congratulate him on his decision. Erdogan added that supporting a two-state solution would represent the most effective stance against Israel's policies. Well, to discuss this, we are joined by Maurice Hirsch of the Jerusalem Centre for Security and Foreign Affairs. Thank you for being with us. Now, how do these steps taken by France, the UK and other countries impact regional alignment on Palestine?
I think that the impact of these moves cannot be understated. They are a direct move that will undermine the entire region. They are a reward for terrorism. They basically say to Hamas, by murdering Jews, you will be rewarded politically. When Hamas set out on the 7th of October with the goal of murdering and getting recognition for the state of Palestine, French President Macron, Keir Starmer, Cancy in Canada, are now simply playing into the goals of Hamas. That will bring no peace. That will only bring more destabilization, that will embolden the genocidal terrorists and will distance peace probably for generations away because of a stupid move that means nothing practically. It's just political maneuvering.
These are G7 countries, Maurice. These are G7 countries and they have followed suit from France. Is there really no significance to this? Is this not showing that Israel is becoming more isolated on the international stage?
Absolutely not, Katie. Absolutely not, Katie. What it's showing is that these countries are willing to throw away international law in order to recognize a state that does not exist, that does not meet the criteria of the Montevideo Convention from 1933. They're reinventing a state simply called Palestine. They might as well just invent Narnia as well.
But that's not strictly true, Maurice, is it? That's not strictly true.
Yes, what was wrong with that? What is going to be the borders of the state of Palestine, Katie? Did any of them say that? No, they didn't. Who is going to be the governance authority of this new state? Is it going to be Hamas, the genocidal terrorist? Because if they go to elections, they will be elected. Is it going to be the Palestinian Authority that doesn't control Gaza and hasn't controlled Gaza for 20 years? So when you're talking about governance and effective governance over a certain territory, certainly this declaration of a recognition of a state of Palestine cannot include both Gaza and the West Bank and Judea and Samaria as one state, because there's no single governance there. So really what they are doing is pushing away peace, rewarding the terrorists. And I'll tell you another thing, Katie. Once these countries now recognize the state of Palestine, what is going to happen to the so-called Palestine refugees that now live in their own state? They can no longer be refugees.
Thank you very much, Maurice, for your insights and for joining us on the programme.
Thank you very much.
In Kabul, environmental cooperation took centre stage as Afghan and Kyrgyz officials met to explore new avenues for joint action. Our Afghanistan correspondent Tamim Bahis has more from Kabul.
Matiullah Khalis, the General Director of Afghanistan's National Environmental Protection Agency, held talks with Turdakon Sedikov, the ambassador of Kyrgyzstan, to discuss regional collaboration in combating climate challenges. The two sides emphasized the need for sharing technical expertise and experiences to protect their fragile ecosystems. Mr. Khalis stressed that collective regional action is key to safeguarding natural resources and promoting sustainable development. Kyrgyz ambassador echoed the sentiment, reaffirming his country's support for Afghanistan's environmental initiatives. The meeting comes at a time when Afghanistan is grappling with the severe consequences of climate change. According to the International Organization for Migration, nearly 5 million people in Afghanistan have been affected by climate-related disasters so far this year. Flash floods and avalanches in the first 3 months alone displaced around 175,000 people, nearly 80% due to climate events. Another 396,000 were forced to migrate due to worsening conditions, especially in rural areas. The United Nations reports that many families have lost their homes and are struggling to access clean drinking water. Afghanistan ranks among the 10 countries most vulnerable to climate change. Officials say that without sustained regional cooperation, the environmental crisis will continue to deepen. This is Tamim Bahis in Kabul for A News.
That's all we have for now. Thank you for watching and stay tuned to A News.